Morning Cafe this very last Friday of February 2024. Mwezi inaenda kuisha.
Oh yes. We are marching into March.
Oh yeah. And yes, the weekend is beckoning. Ni weekend imefika. Tunakwenda kujirusha. Do stand by for a lot of more entertainment coming later on, of course, after we discuss the state of the nation. My name is Freddy Ndimuli. How hot is a coffee where you are?
And I'm usually Stanley Nyoringite. Karibu sana for Feel Good Friday. And as he rightfully says, DJ Slides will be right here to make your Feel Good Friday as fantastic as it should. Talk to us. Unataka uchezeo ngoma gani? We'll also be having K-Force right in the building to just getting to know what kind of how music is taking them. Stick around for that. Right now, though, let's get into the highlights in the newspapers.
Right, on the Standard, fare thee well. That's a big headline with a photo of Kelvin Kiptum.
Daily Nation storm over new taxes.
Kwaheri Kiptum, gazeti la Taifa Leo, habari kuu pale.
Kwingineko, people daily hustlers face shock in new housing bill.
And on Business Daily, World Bank, IMF charging Kenya 14.5% interest, that's according to the control of budget.
And on the Star, IBC 500 million cash shillings payout, top lawyers hit jackpot. Right, those are the headlines. Let's take a look at the roads and how they're looking like. One crazy road this morning is Thika Road. In case you're heading into Nairobi, this is Pangani, as you can see the red line. So just before you actually hit the building that used to house Jubilee Party, that red line just before it, but then it promises to ease into that particular tunnel. People say it's either if you're hitting right, when mtu ako na pesa. If you're hitting left,
I think it's the other way around. Watu wa pesa ndo wanaenda Kirinyaga Road.
The right, all right. And also another alternative route just below it seems to have quite the traffic there. Before you actually hit the Muthaiga, in between the alternative roads, yellow lines as well as the Agoi Road, as you can see right here. The Agoi Road as well before. Now, if you're using Northview Road, you'll most likely get into some traffic snarl-up that promises to ease up past that. Other roads are looking as clear as possible, just yellow patches that will be easing up. It's a Friday, so you'd expect an easy kind of traffic in the morning as well. Let's get into the weather, and Kama Kawaida just taking a look at quite a number of areas and how the weather is looking like. In West Pokot right now, 15 degrees Celsius, but they say it feels like 18 degrees Celsius, promises to get as hot as 27 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, temperatures of 29 degrees Celsius, 30 in the evening, about 15, 16 and 14 degrees Celsius. That's in West Pokot. Pale Eldoret, where all roads are leading to today for the burial of Kelvin Kiptum, marathon record holder, 14 degrees Celsius, but it was about 13 degrees Celsius there. Promises to get as hot as 25, 26 degrees Celsius. Into the night, 14 degrees, 12 for the weekend, and as hot as 27 degrees Celsius. That's in Eldoret. Hapa Nairobi, 18 degrees Celsius, and as hot as 26. And finally, kwa pale Masaku, it feels like 18, but it's 17 degrees Celsius, and promises to get as hot as 26. Into the weekend, temperatures as high as 23 and 28 pale Kingia Monday, 29. That's the weather update and traffic for you. Let's get into the highlights.
All right, in the highlights today, world marathon record holder Kelvin Kiptum to be laid to rest today at his home in Naiberu or Singishu County in an event to be attended by, among others, President William Ruto.
Meanwhile, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition now warns of new taxation plans contained in the budget policy statement presented to Parliament by the Executive. Right, and that is on the highlights this morning. But then speak of the farewell Kiptum, that forms our top of the news diary, the burial of Kelvin Kiptum, world marathon record holder Kelvin Kiptum being laid to rest today during a funeral service at the Agriculture Show of Kenya grounds in Chepkorio, Elgeyo Marakwet County. Meanwhile, some Parliament committees' diary, the Committee on Energy will be holding a meeting at around 9 a.m. With the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum to consider 2024 BPS. Meanwhile, today is the last day of the National Prevention Week. So the National Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, that is NACADA, will be concluding the National Prevention Week Summit. The summit was launched yesterday at the Bomas of Kenya. Quite interesting numbers were produced from this summit. Pretty sure you'll be taking a look at them with your panelists, just seeing how the drug abuse in the country is. So this Prevention Week began on Monday, and its sole purpose was raising awareness on preventive measures for those abstaining and those those even in recovery. Meanwhile, the Magical Kenya Open 2024 enters day 2 today at the Muthaiga Par 71 Golf Club. Par 71, yeah, Muthaiga Golf Club. That is on the highlights and also diary for you this morning. Let's get into the newspaper review now.
All right, fare thee well. That's a big headline on the front page of the Standard this morning. Kwaheri Shujaa, Kelvin Kiptum, though only 24, has etched his name as one of the greatest athletes in the world, whose record in the marathon is the envy of legends. As the country bids farewell to its hero today, Kenyans can only hope another like him will emerge, and this piece of news has been given prominence coverage on pages 2, 3, and 31. So if you open page 2 and 3, it's been both pages have been dedicated to Kelvin Kiptum, and a very nice photo of this gentleman who passed on about 2 weeks ago at the age of only 24. That's the most prominent headline on the front page. Other pieces of news: retail insurance ranked as suppliers' worst nightmare. And of course, I know this matters entertainment, and this will excite.
Oh, we're getting to that.
Fashion meets beat at Pulse Awards.
We're getting to that.
On Matters National News, brace for more taxes, Azimio warns. Azimio principals say the 2024 budget policy statement is only meant to prolong the suffering of Kenyans and would amount to double taxation. They, however, ruled out resumption of street protests. That story is on page 4. If we flip the page to the back page, some piece of news: Arteta insists Arsenal will learn from defeat. They lost to Porto earlier this week. Porto stunned the Gunners with stoppage time winner in Champions League tie. The other game played was Barcelona. And who was Barcelona facing?
Napoli.
Napoli, yeah, they drew 1-1. So yes, for sports lovers, a lot of...
Did you heal, by the way? News. Did you heal?
Who, me?
Yes.
Do I look like I'm suffering?
I mean,
those small leagues, we know what we are focusing on. Plus, we'll still survive. Anyway, that's the Standard today.
All right. And obviously, I said we'll get to it. Fashion meets beat at Pulse Awards, the Pulse Music Video Awards. On the front page of the Pulse, they say on the red carpet, and Matters filmed there and pictured by the one and only Sylvia Sanjo.
All right.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. And they're saying entertainers were feted during the 9th PMVA's gala.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
It's a Friday. We definitely have to recognize the recognizables.
Well.
Oh, yes.
To so many.
Let's get into Daily Nation now. And storm over new taxes. They also say it's a clash, so Azimio leaders lobby Senate to reject a bill to charge the housing levy. They have some pain points here. Number one, tripling of petroleum regulatory levy to 0.75 per litre. Number two, withholding tax on payments for goods supplied to the government. Also, 5% withholding tax on farm produce supplied to cooperatives. Number 3, licensing fees review for banks, including 1 billion Kenyan shillings minimum capital, and VAT on educational services likely to prompt a school fees increment. And the opposition has vowed to block what it termed as a second wave of punitive taxes that will further burden Kenyans and shrink household incomes, even as the government, through the budget policy statement, defended aggressive measures to boost revenue collection to 4 trillion Kenyan shillings amid increasing debt repayments on pages 4 and 5. On the bottom, 2 highlights before crossover to the left. Ruto to lobby for Raila AU job bid, and Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Korir Sing'oei announces that the president will soon formally name Raila as Kenya's candidate for the Africa Union Commission chairperson's post. Meanwhile, graduates from private varsities denied papers. On the left, picture there, a gentleman who will be hailed today. Fare thee well, champ. And they say Kenya and the world will today bid goodbye to the record-breaking marathon champion Kevin Kiptum during a funeral service at the Agricultural Show of Kenya grounds in Chepkorio, Elgeyo Marakwet County. The 24-year-old runner was on the cusp of greatness before his death. And this reminds me of, we were talking about the house that he was being built for. And there was a whole conversation about the house.
Yes.
Right now there are photos of how that house has been concluded. And there's still conversation about it.
Yes, I'm sure that will be a matter of interest to so many Kenyans. They want to see, because everyone was saying, okay, fine, let's wait until it's done, and let's not judge it before. So I think we'll get a lot of photos from there.
Oh, yes. A final bit on the top strip, still to push to protect data security privacy in AI age. They say matters reforms. So Information Cabinet Secretary Elido Alo tells participants at the Digital Summit that policies and regulations are being drafted to ensure the integration of artificial intelligence adheres to ethical standards and privacy rights. That in a nutshell is the Daily Nation. Crossover to Taifa Leo.
Yes, Kwaheri Kiptum ndio habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Wakenya waaga mwanariadha nyota aliyeshikilia rekodi ya dunia katika marathon. Na kuna picha pale ya mwanariadha mwenyewe. Mwanariadha anayeshikilia rekodi ya dunia kwa mbio za kilomita 42, Kelvin Kiptum, ambaye anazikwa leo, ameombolezwa kama mkimbiaji mpole, mwenye bidii na nidhamu. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Vidokezo zaidi kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Kongamano la dijitali laanza rasmi. Kwingineko, ODM yakana mvutano wa urithi chamani. Katibu wa chama anasema habari za mvutano wa urithi chamani ni za uongo. Na kwingineko, mtihani wa mwigo somo la chemistry. Nafikiri utapata mtihani wenyewe kule ndani kwenye gazeti. Pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, masuala ya sport. Arsenal FC yakosa risasi katika UEFA. Gunners wana kibarua kuzaba Porto ili kufuzu kwa 8 bora. Lakini kabla ya hapo, kwingineko, na hii ni habari ya kutatanisha. Walevi wafurika Nyeri baada baa za kwao kufungwa, na ni wakazi wasafiri kaunti jirani kukata kiu baada ya kaunti yao kufunga baa zote kufuatia vifo kutokana na vileo. Na wanasema ni walevi kutoka Kirinyaga wanavuka kuingia kaunti jirani ya Nyeri ili kukata kiu, alafu wanarejea nyumbani. Yeah. Na pale wanakokwenda ni nyumbani kwa naibu wa rais Rigathi Gachagua pale Karatina, Madera. Hilo ndilo gazeti la Taifa Leo.
Taarifa nyingine ya kuhuzunisha kwa wengine pale, Arsenal FC yakosa risasi
katika. Kama tushamaliza hiyo, tunaweza songa mbele na habari zingine sasa.
Tutatanisha lile. Wasema Gunners wana kibarua kuzaba Porto ili kufuzu kwa 8 bora. Vidokezo vya Taifa Leo pale. Lakini kwenye gazeti la People Daily, vidokezo very interesting vidokezos here. Hustlers face shock in new housing bill. There's a gentleman there rushing pale kwa mjengo na the wheelbarrow. And there's a quote by National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah: the mama mbogas, boda boda riders and jokali artisans will now participate fully in the program by contributing to the levy as directed by the court. How that will happen, wait to see. Other highlights on, well, we're in context basically saying Kenya Kwanza MPs vote to amend law to include non-salaried workers who constitute president's support base as contributors to controversial law. At the very bottom, that push and pull between governors and the national government continues. And they say, governors, why we want 450 billion Kenyan shillings? So county chiefs harden the position that money is allocated by revenue. Commission should not be altered. More highlights on the left strip. The first one, fresh fight over cash for artists. On the bottom, Kenyans debate faster building model. And at the very top, an interesting one here, DPP, the Ruto laundry man. That is on page 2. Quite interesting choice of words, something that really be curious to.
Inakuwa safi kama pamba.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at the Star. And on the front page of the Star this morning, the main headline, IEBC 500 million shilling payout. Top lawyers hit jackpot. Now they say in legal fees, IEBC paid 158 million shillings to lead lawyer in Ruto Raila's 2022 presidential petition. Wow. The Auditor General queries payout after her office was not given supportive documents. That story is on page 6. The Star also makes mention to the funeral of Kelvin Kiptum, and it talks about a secret lover who surfaced as Kiptum's body lay at home for state burial. And a photo there of this lady who claims to be Kiptum's secret lover splashed there on the front page. Other highlights, NEMIS ignored as schools manually paid 11.8 billion shillings. Elsewhere, pregnancy, childbirth doctors, the most sued. And in matters budget, new wave of taxes will worsen cost of living, as Emir warns. And that's the Star this Friday.
Let's talk money matters now. World Bank IMF charging Kenya 14.5% interest, that is according to the control of budget, and what Margaret Nyakango, who appeared before Parliament committee yesterday, was saying on that. And according to, in just more context on this particular bit, the control of budget, that is Margaret Nyakango, has flagged the cost of concessional loans taken up by the government over the years from lenders such as the International Monetary Fund as well as the World Bank, saying they might be expensive in the long run. The quota number there, 1.73 trillion Kenyan shillings, that is the outstanding credit from the two World Bank agencies by the end of June 2023. But interestingly, the debt chief dismisses claims and says that, well, probably Nyakango got these figures wrong. Interesting story there. On the bottom of that story, matters education. Varsity graduates caught up in 31 billion Kenyan shillings pending bills, a nightmare. A similar story that was in a different paper. So they say Barrington Gesimba was overjoyed when he graduated with honors from a Bachelor of Science in Applied Computer Science from DStv on the 10th of November last year. The ceremony is a watershed moment in his career and entry into the job market. On the right, that ticker, radio audience drops on digital media growth. And radio listenership in Kenya has taken a hit, courtesy of accelerated digitization of media consumption, dropping from an audience base of 92% of the country's population in 2014 to 77% as of last year. And key to note is that according to InfoTrack, Radio 47, number 4, among other stations.
Yeah, that station, our sister station, doing extremely well.
And TV 47 as well.
Of course.
Number 4.
We lead, others follow.
Oh, yes.
How about that?
Oh, yes.
That is Matters Business, and I guess that's our cue to cross the borders and take a look at the headlines in neighboring Uganda. And we make our way to Kampala, and they are talking about murder. Murders, road accidents claim 25 Ugandans daily. This is a crime report. Last year's police crime report shows that pedestrians were hit hardest, with border borders responsible for majority of accidents due to reckless riding and speeding. The report also says aggravated robberies, especially those where firearms are used, increased from 182 cases in 2022 to 217 in 2023. It is a special report given some coverage on pages 4 and 5 of the Daily Monitor. And they have a photo there of some women seated on the ground. They say Karimojong Women Sentenced to Community Service. And this picture is about, these are just some of the Karimojong women outside City Hall Court, where they were sentenced to 1 month's community service for sending their children to beg on the streets. And the highlights on the front page: South Sudan asks for electricity from Uganda. And elsewhere, Besigye Group consults over next move ahead of polls. Those are the big stories in Uganda on the Daily Monitor. The other daily in Uganda is A New Vision. And they still talk about matters crime, how one gun was used in 22 murders. Same crime report. I guess this is the biggest talking point in Uganda today. The Nkoni stick leading cause of death in Ankole. Pages 6 and 7. You can see the kind of prominence this story has been given. Matters crime in Uganda. And a photo there of a Harvest Money Expo kicking off today. Matters agriculture. Other highlights: trafficked girl reunites with family after 2 years. Elsewhere, what Museveni told district leaders in Kwanza. And on matters health, absentee health workers to be struck off payroll. Also, matters crime, there's an acid attacker who has been handed a 50-year jail term, and that story has been highlighted on the front page of the New Vision. So these are the big stories in Kampala, Uganda this morning.
Right. From Kampala, let's take the bus all the way to Kigali in Rwanda and see what is happening in that country. As far as the New Times is concerned, matters elections forming the big news and big talking points in Rwanda. NEC, which is the National Electoral Commission, says they're ready to go ahead of historic polls. More is on pages 4 and 5 for more context. So the NEC chief explained, among others, why it was important to harmonize the elections. It was a whole Q&A interview.
And this is very interesting because it's the first time I've seen something linked to politics on the front page
of
the New Times in Rwanda.
And as much as, though, it's subtle.
Yes,
very subtle.
about the elections.
Yes. And it was just an interview with the NEC chief. And no mention of who is vying and who is not vying.
Yeah.
Yes. Speak of, matters politics and all that, Kagame Kir discussed root causes of insecurity in the region. So the President, Paul Kagame of Rwanda, held talks with the chair of the EAC, that is President Salva Kiir of South Sudan, yesterday. The highlights on this paper: 55 billion Rwandan francs project launched to upgrade informal settlements in Kigali. And that, in a nutshell, is the front page of the New Times. Tuelekee pale kutoka Kigali hadi Dar es Salaam. Tuone ni yapi yanaendelea pale, and we do start with the Citizen. And in Tanzania right now, it's either they're talking about sugar or beer. Those are the two major talking points in this daily that we'll be taking a look at. So first off, the Citizen, war on sugar cartels. And according to the Ministry of Agriculture, and he says we will submit a bill for liberalizing the sugar business so that local producers compete with other importers. We have protected the producers for about 20 years, yet we still have sugar challenges. And one of the challenges that he's talking about is sugar cartels. And the government is avoiding now to shake the big boys who they're terming as, the cartels. So they say 5,000. In some areas, a kilogram of sugar went for as much as 5,000 Tanzania.
Oh, Tanzania money. Yeah.
How roughly? Quick maths.
Kilo, okay, yes, it's about is it 300 shillings, 300 or 400 shillings. Could be about 500 bob, more or less the same as in Kenya.
Yeah. All right. So yes, so at the height of the scarcity, so that's a kg.
Oh yeah, that's a kg.
A kg of
in Kenya, at least 500 bob gives you 2 kilos. So
yes.
Yeah, a kilo in Kenya should be about 250. Yeah.
So it's now double.
It's actually much higher in Tanzania.
Yes.
True.
So they've doubled the price because of the scarcity of it. Another highlight matters beer. They say High Court ruling a relief in Zanzibar's beer shortage. More is on page 3. That is the Citizen for you this morning.
Alright, tuangazie gazeti la Mwananchi. Bado kule Bongo, masuala ya sukari bado. Uamuzi mgumu, maumivu ya sukari bado moto. Habari kuu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi. Sema serikali yaibuka na mkakati mpya wa kukomesha kampuni kwenye uagizaji biashara ya sukari ili kupunguza maumivu kwa wananchi. NFRA yapewa kazi wafanyabiashara 84 mbaroni. Wametiwa mbaroni sababu ya sukari. Habari zingine, mahakama ya amuru bodi ya vileo kuzipa leseni kampuni 3 iliyozinyima Zanzibar. Uko wasemaje?
Si habari tamu hiyo.
Si habari tamu. Masuala ya pombe ulikuwa umesema kampuni 3 zilinyimwa leseni kule Zanzibar, lakini mahakama imeamuru bodi wapewe leseni, watu wapewe tembo. Wengineko, ahadi ya Mramba kumaliza mgao wa umeme. Na habari zaidi, mbivu mbichi, hukumu kesi ya mauaji ya dada wa bilionea Msuya leo. Na hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi kule Tanzania.
Right. Two other papers on still in Tanzania. There's The Guardian as well as Nipashe. We do start with The Guardian. And still on matters sugar, government to revamp sugar laws to remove monopoly structures. Picture there, the Minister of Agriculture in that country. Another highlight, reinstate beer importers, court orders liquor board. Curious because it was around Zanzibar and the prices of beer. I remember back, I think was it early this week or late last week, we were reporting about that. And so I'm curious because now should they have crossed the border into Kenya looking for cheaper?
Zanzibar is quite far.
as people of Nyeri are doing.
Yeah, crossing over to the next county.
Yes.
Umekaribishwa hapa Kenya.
Into the final paper, there is Nipashe. Hatimaye serikali ya kunjua makucha. Masuala ya sukari, sheria kufumuliwa kibano chaja wenye viwanda. Kwingineko, matumaini ya rejea uhakika umeme. Matters electricity also forming big talking points, as well as the rains, being told that prepare for heavy rains in that country. That is our cue to get into the caricature and see how the cartoons are looking like this morning.
The cartoon on page 16 of the Daily Nation talks about Baba's AU bid, and you can see 2 people there with T-shirts with the Raila Odinga's image. These should be the people campaigning for him, and they look like the Prime CS and his boss, the president, and they are saying Baba Tosha. So yes, these 2 gentlemen are the main campaigners for Raila Odinga's AU bid. Page 12 of the Standard. On page 12 of the Standard speaks about Parliament and the housing bill. On one hand, we have the president with a document there branded housing bill and a tick. And anaonyesha kidole ile yes to MPs. And you remember the MPs actually passed this bill and it now moves to the Senate. So yes, the president is indeed a happy man with the members of Parliament. Now, these MPs are carrying a sack. I do not know, and I do not want to to say what this sack could be carrying. But yes, the president is happy, and it would appear the MPs are also satisfied.
Yes. But then, speaking of satisfied, there are people who are not satisfied, according to Stano. This common Mwananchi looks injured and worried, and she's saying this is the state of a taxpayer in Kenya. And just above her, there is a tire that is ramming through her that has been branded State House budget, 447 million Kenyan shillings. This reminds me again what Azmi was even warning Kenyans that beware of the taxes that may be coming your way.
Yes, and the question is, how is this money being spent? If at all, State House can spend an extra 447 million while Kenyans are suffering and are being told to tighten their belts. All right, we'll be discussing some of these headlines with my panelists after the break. This morning, on the panel, we'll be having Ndong Evans, constitutional law analyst, Judy Oyo, Ability Beyond founder and political analyst, and Wakili Francis Wanjiku, the public policy analyst and an advocate of the High Court. Do stand by for that. Later on, Feel Good Friday.
Oh, yes. Having digital slides around, as well as the KFOS. Yes.
All right, something to look forward to.
Yes.
KFOS and Mr. K4. Wow. You can be part of all these conversations online using our social media pages on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Time now for us to take a break. You're watching Morning Cafe.
All right.
a look at the state of the nation. And with me in studio is Bwana Ndong Evans, constitutional law analyst. Good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here once again.
Great. Now, very interesting headlines this morning on matters taxes, and we'll come to that. Also, Raila's bid for the AU job. But there's something that has drawn my attention, and it's on the front page of the Daily Nation. Graduates from private universities denied papers. The story has been extensively covered on the back page of the Daily Nation, and this will definitely concern a number of university students. And they talk about students not being able to access their degree certificates after completing their courses at private universities, simply because these universities are owed money by the government. And it stems from a program where it started in 2018 to 2019 academic year, where the government would place students to private universities and partly pay for their tuition fees. However, the government did not meet its full obligation, and private universities are now claiming 31.4 billion shillings in pending bills. Now, this ideally was a matter of trying to assist more students access university education, especially beyond even the available public spaces in the public universities. But now we're seeing that it is not being handled properly. When it comes to education matters, because we've been discussing education quite a lot, are you confident with this administration's handling of education matters so far?
I think, Fred, let me begin by first telling Kenyans that I think when this government came up with the idea of the new funding model, from that point, it was a very good program that was, thought out by the government in terms of how they could subsidize education. Taking into consideration the fact that education is one of those social economic rights that the government has the obligation to meet. But I think the structures that were put in place in terms of how the new funding model will take course, quite a bit was not, the thought process was not well done. The implementation framework has had, a lot of challenges, because you recall that under this new funding model, public and private universities, first they were supposed to declare, the cost of their programs in terms of what would be the general cost of their programs, and then have a memorandum of understanding with the government in that regard. And then it is that memorandum of understanding that they would be required to sign with the government that would determine how much the government will contribute in terms of for the private universities, in terms of how much they would take as regards to the tuition fees of the students. But as you can see, most private and public universities exactly did that because there was no way they could proceed with the programs if they had not signed that memorandum of understanding with the government. But the government, unfortunately, has not done its bit of the bargain, and we are again in a crisis where fresh graduates are battling unemployment. At the same time, they cannot access their degree certificates once they have finished their university education, which then calls the question, whereas this was a very good idea, was it well thought out in terms of funding estimates by the government? Okay. Did the government think through the process of this funding, in a manner that later on we would not have a scenario where MOUs are signed with private and public universities, and yet the government is not able to meet its funding. And
I can see Francis Wanjiku has also made his way to studio, and I'd like to invite him to join us on set. Francis Wanjiku is a lawyer. He's also a public policy expert, and he's the head of public policy at IC Law LLP. Karibu sana, Bwana Wanjiku. We still continue discussing matters education and the kind of problems that we're now seeing. But Evans, back to you. This issue of the way education is being handled by successive administrations brings into question the sustainability of some of these programs. Yes, the Jubilee administration is the one that started this. You can actually see on the back page between 2018 and 2019. And this amount that is owed up until 2022, the financial year, just before the elections. So the elections happen, the new administration comes into place, and then we see a major shift in how education is being handled. A new funding model is put in place, but what happens to those people who are under a different regime? Is it fair for the students some of them who may not even have taken part in the 2022 elections, for this to keep on shifting with the changes in political leadership?
Well, it's not fair at all. I mean, there would be no reason why the students who are not part of the new process, the new models that were introduced by the successive government, that is the Kenya Kwanza government, should be a collateral. It should be a collateral of whatever happened, in the previous regime. But I think there is something more into it. I think as a republic, we are used to government coming with new ideas without, simply ensuring that the existing framework is fully implemented so that we do not, affect, those who had been there before or the framework that was already in place. And the problem with that is usually they get a scapegoat of simply saying, we did not do this. It is the previous government that, did this. It would surprise you that, more than 1 year, almost 1.5 years, we are still talking about the Jubilee regime, what the Jubilee regime did. We are still talking about it is the Jubilee regime that put us into this mess, which calls to the question, why is it that the government cannot take responsibility? Even if you're introducing something new, you recall the mess that was there with the CBC. We have now had various task forces, they have brought reports, education stakeholders have rejected some of these proposals that they are making. But then the underlying thing is that, when a government is to introduce something new, whether it's a new government, the buck stops with it. I mean, Uhuru Kenyatta is no longer in power today. So whereas this was a crisis that began in 2018, all the way to 2022, the buck still stops with this government that when you are introducing something new, ensure that the existing framework, the funding system of the existing, you have already phased up the existing framework and ensure that all those that were in that framework are not disadvantaged because of the new program that you are introducing.
Francis, this problem appears to be very common, especially after elections, when a new administration comes into place. And all policies and plans that were there before, the new administration seeks to delink or completely from them. But there must be collateral damage, because now when it comes to education, because the belief is that government actually works in perpetuity. We cannot tell between one government, one administration and the next. But when for example, this new administration has come up with a new funding model for universities. Then let's say 2027, something happens and a new administration comes into place. Would it be fair for the new administration to come and do away with that new funding model, simply because they are now in charge?
Thank you, Fred. I think one thing I have said before here is that the current regime has very good policy thinkers and policy makers. The only problem is that they do not have the patience to see something from one stage to another. Because for you to come up with a university funding policy, you need time. You need to engage the students who are in school, you need to engage parliament, you need to engage parents. But you come in, you want to implement this policy within 12 months. What does that mean? It means you cut off every stakeholder who is within the process. But that being said, I think the most important thing about the university funding policy is realizing first the problem. Kenyan universities were in a mess. And part of the mess was the government is the only shareholder of these universities. It's the only owner. For the last maybe 10 years or 20 years, the government has failed to fund these universities. So you'll find that the only funding universities are receiving is capitation for student fees. They're not receiving any development kind of capitation. So what does that mean? Right now, universities are unable to pay pension. If you look at the RBA report, you'll find universities have a bill of around 47 billion. This means that if a university professor or if a university administrator retires today, they will not get their pension. Secondly, universities are even unable to get money to seek simple services like accreditation. Right now, as we speak, I'm in court with Egerton University. They are unable to get accreditation for their engineering courses. It's because one of the biggest reasons is because they don't have the money. For you to get an accreditation of one course, you need maybe 3 million to pay the Commission of University of Education.
And they cannot afford it.
They cannot afford this money. As we speak, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University has not had a graduation in the last 12 months because they do not have money for graduation. So I can tell you for a fact that universities were in a mess because they had a cash flow crisis that government was not plugging.
But is it sustainable to have the number of universities we're having? And still back to the same question, because this proliferation of universities was not there during the Moi administration. It's when Kibaki came in and gave charters to so many institutions to become universities. That is the one administration that oversaw so many polytechnics and village colleges turned into universities. Now we are seeing that a decade later, 15 years later, we are no longer able to sustain these universities. These are decisions made by particular administrations that maybe the subsequent administrations may not really buy into. Is it time we ring-fence education to ensure that it is free of political influence with successive governments?
Yes, Fred, and I agree with my brother Francis that the universities were already in a cash flow crisis, a lot of it, and you did indeed mention something that is very important, that in public policy and in terms of implementation of public policy, it is assumed that government operates in perpetuity, and I think one of the biggest way we are going to sort out this is to delink the politics of the day from the education sector. I wouldn't say that it was a bad idea for the former President Kibaki to open so many charters, to give, open so many universities. Today, as we speak, I think it's almost like every county has a university. And if some counties have no university, you will find that the government has a plan, of opening a university, opening a charter here and there. But I think the problem with opening so many universities, is that these ideas were not well thought out in terms of funding. Because tell me, what is the need of establishing a university? Today we are talking about the case of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University that has not had a graduation in the last 12 months.
How do you have a university without graduation? What is the point of having that university?
It's ridiculous. It even means that there are other universities at the same time that are able to fund themselves, like the University of Nairobi, although the University of Nairobi has also been in a crisis. It means, therefore, that it even lengthens the time that, one undertakes at the university to take a degree course, which just adds up into the entire crisis of university graduates and the mass flow that goes into the market. But something else is that when you expand, the number of universities without what he has talked about, you have not ensured that in terms of capacity, government capacitation to fund is not well taken care of and is devoid of political interference, you also affect the quality of the degrees and the quality of the programs, because this funding also goes into the quality of lecturers, professors that teach at the university. I think teaching at the universities, and in terms of even how they are being paid right now, if you look at Egerton University is in a crisis. If you look at Pwani University, it's in a crisis. It's almost like every 3 months we must have a strike, either of university workers or the university students themselves, and you have also seen the crisis does not only stop there. It extends to the question of help. Even in the new funding model, we still had issues with help, we still had issues with timing, we still have issues with allocation. Mm-hmm. So I think when we delink the politician, when we delink education, a sector so important as education, from the political process, we will achieve some of these good ideas.
But is it possible, Francis, is it possible to say that, okay, fine, education or our education system or sector will be free from manipulation or influence of successive regimes, that we say that a new president comes in, they may not have a lot of influence on how we run our education? Is it possible?
I don't think you can separate education from politics, because if you look at our constitution, one of the functions of the national government is education. And if you look at who is the national government, this includes the executive, it includes parliament, it includes other civil society. So if you're going to open a university somewhere in Coast and the local leadership does not support that program, you're not going to open that university. And if you're being told that you need to open a university in Wajir and that there are no students in Wajir, you're still going to open that university. So one of the things Kenyans need to realize is that Parliament is the one that holds the purse. So any money that is being spent by the national government today, they have to appreciate that this proposal has gone through Parliament. Mm-hmm. Parliamentarians have said, okay, it is okay for you to open a university in Gatondo. If there's one thing you need to find out as the media, there are so many KMTCs in Kenya today. I think there are about more than 20. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that all these KMTCs have students? there's a likelihood that some of these KMTCs don't have students, but because there's the political mileage within the local community, the national government is forced to open a KMTC. So I am of the opinion that yes, it's good thinking that let's separate our politics from the education policy. But is it possible in the medium term? No, it's not possible. And part of the reason is because we need political support in terms of spending money in education. One of my proposals, and which I strongly agree with, is we need to see how we can make education free right from nursery school all the way to Form 4. So it removes the need of things like CDF, because CDF is just political patronage. So if we are able to have a policy where the government says, okay, I'm funding education free from nursery, which is the county government, all the way to secondary school, it will help at least remove a bit of influence of MPs in our education.
Do you think Parliament is actually giving this discussion the attention it deserves? Matters education, whether or not we're actually giving quality to our students, and whether or not we're actually making some of them suffer unnecessarily?
Not quite. I don't think. I think one of those institutions that have said so many times on this show that has dropped the ball is the Parliament that we currently have. But even before I go to that, I think let me comment on one thing that my learned friend, Mr. Wanjiku, has said in regards to when I said we need to delink the political process from a very critical sector such as education. My thinking is not to completely save our education, from the political process, because it is directly linked to the politics. And I agree that the national government still has the function, of taking care of our education. But I think the biggest challenge is that whereas the political class is making decisions around education, the stakeholders, the most important stakeholders in the education process, always come at the end. You can imagine the mess we got into through the CBC implementation framework. The only time we thought that we should review the process, you remember when Professor Magoa was at the helm of education, there were all these calls from all the stakeholders telling Prof that let's sit down with the Ministry of Education. This is a good idea. The implementation is going to meet headwinds, and it's because of the most important stakeholders, Fred, in the process are not always being engaged in good time. Actually, they become a thought process after things have gone all wrong. So even as he has said, you can look at the crisis with KMTCs. Today, KMTCs are everywhere. I think there's even a new one that was opened close to my village the other day, And it is always when the crisis of them getting 20 students, 30 students comes on 4, that is the only time the government thinks, oh, wow, we need to revisit this process. So yes, the politicians hold a very important role, in terms of passing this legislation. But to Parliament, I think, has dropped the ball a big deal, especially in things that matter. I think Parliament has been at the control of the executive, and the executive here, I mean, the presidency, itself. The other day, you saw in Naivasha, where the president, the president stands authoritatively and tells Parliament, you must pass this thing by Tuesday. Na mpitishe haraka, msilete siasa, So, and you see that Parliament did exactly that. So even though Parliament would have been acting in its, constitutional mandate, the image, the perception, the public confidence in Parliament to undertake policies, to bring reasonable debates, quality debates on things that matter, things that are critical such as education, have really gone low, because we always assume, and we assume rightly so, that whatever the executive says, when the executive calls the shots, Parliament will always respond to that. We have even seen positions, issues where the Speaker of the National Assembly openly in public space takes a political position on a matter that is going to come before for quality debates. So that usually affects. So that it is very difficult for Parliament to operate, to debate, in a manner that is cogent on such serious
And after the
issues.
break, we'll be coming back to take a look at Parliament's conduct on other matters that you mentioned, including the way they treated the affordable housing bill and the upcoming NADCO report, which will be debated, I think, next week. You're watching Morning Cafe. This morning, we have Andong Evans and Francis Wenjiku in studio. Do stand by as we continue with more conversations after the break. A constitutional law analyst, and Francis Wenjiku, public policy analyst as well. Gentlemen, I want us to move to the big headline on the front page of the Daily Nation. It talks about storm over new taxes. Azimio leaders saying they're going to lobby the Senate to reject a bill to charge housing levy that was passed by the National Assembly. But the crux of the matter, the opposition has vowed to block what it termed as a second wave of punitive taxes that will further burden Kenyans and shrink household incomes, even as the government, through the budget policy statement, defended aggressive measures to boost revenue collection to 4 trillion amid increasing debt repayments. And they've listed some of the pay points that we should expect in the coming budget process: a tripling of the petroleum regulatory levy to 75 cents a litre, withholding tax on payments for goods supplied to government, 5% withholding tax on farm produce supplied to cooperatives, licensing fees review for banks, including 1 billion shillings minimum capital, and VAT on educational services, likely to prompt school fee increments. But now, I want to look at this in connection to the conduct of Parliament, because the budget-making process now is before Parliament. They're the ones to deal with this. But it would appear that as Bwana Evans mentioned, whatever goes to Parliament right now from the executive is simply rubber stamped by Parliament. And when it comes to such important debate, one would expect that Parliament would offer some quality to any government policy, especially when it comes to the budget process. What do you expect from this Parliament? We've seen how they've conducted themselves and as far as the affordable housing levy is concerned. Do you expect any different when it comes to the budget making process?
So let's distinguish between two things here, and one of them is the tripling of the petroleum regulatory levy. This has already been done. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the fuel bill you're paying this month, this has already been done, despite the Gazette notice being published 4 days ago. So it means that the EPRA anticipated that this increase will be there. So they
rolled it out immediately.
Yes, before even the law came in.
Before the law was there.
Okay. Yes. So there is an obsession, a certain obsession that let's increase taxes, everything will be okay with the citizens. But that is not true. The second one is the role of the budget policy statement. So Kenya has a very elaborate public finance management act. And one of the key roles in Parliament is Parliament has to discuss the proposals that government intends to put out in terms of taxes in the budget policy statement. So that by the time you're getting to debate the finance bill, which is released around April, you already know what government intends to do. So this is a very good thing because Kenyans are much aware early that the government intends to do certain actions. But the problem with this government is that even though that we know there are 3-4 things in the budget policy statement, whatever you will find at the end of the process, at the end of once the finance bill is published, will be a shocker because what you discussed in Parliament and agreed as parliamentarians, no, let's put a foot brake on this proposal. We wait till next year when the economy is better so that we can see how Kenyans will react. Those are the same proposals you'll find in the finance bill.
Nothing will change.
Nothing will change. Because at the end of the day, Treasury is in charge of this process. Whatever document that comes to your desk has been...
Are we saying that Parliament is no longer offering any quality to any of these processes, including the budget-making process?
I think part of the problem is having a majority parliament where you don't need to caucus at all in terms of trying to bring the opposition on your side. That's an election problem. Secondly,
But we've seen parliaments, a majority in other jurisdictions. They do not act in this way. In Britain, for example, of course, for you to form government, you must have the majority. Yes. But they don't always just vote blindly to the last man like that.
I think if you look at Kenya is a very interesting structure. As much as we think we are common law, we adopted a very United States kind of dynamic system. We have a presidential system. So the voice, there's a quote, the voice of the people is the voice of God. That does not apply in this country because the president is the last man to speak. So no matter how much we want a strong parliament, once he calls them at Naivasha Lake Resort, they will do what he wants. Yes. Because
my concern now is Azimio has come out and said we have a problem and we are going to block this. But how exactly will they block it if you do not have the numbers in Parliament? We've seen how the Kenya Kwanza is using the numbers in Parliament. And it's simply to pass each and every motion or bill that comes from government without removing a comma or a full stop. What is the role of this minority, even if they come out and say, fine, we'll try and block it? How?
Fred.
What can they do?
Fred, I think where we have reached as a country, and I would agree with the sentiments of my learned friend, where we have reached as a country, we have a parliament that is somehow taking the form of an executive branch, or a department in the executive arm of the government. And the problems of parliament are so many. There is something currently happening in parliament. Today, we have a budget policy statement that is outside here. And you'd be very shocked that the question of tripling of petroleum regulatory levy, as my friend did put it, is already something that is already being implemented. EPRA has already taken the mandate of implementing it. How did they foresee that Parliament, was going to rubber stamp the same? It's because
it is a guarantee.
It is a guarantee. It's almost a guarantee. And the Parliament has completely become what I would call a conveyor belt for any policy without interrogation. And when the opposition says that they're going to challenge this, just know that the only forum they can challenge this is a court, is in a court of law. It's not through political means, because if it's through political means, that has, proven to be completely untenable. There is something right now happening in Parliament where they say, put the question. Whenever there is any important interrogation, I would give you an example. We just saw the affordable housing bill being passed in Parliament the other day. Today, Parliament is saying that they're going to charge 1.5% on non-salaried Kenyan, on the gross salary of non-salaried Kenyans, the gross income of non-salaried Kenyans. And important questions were being raised to the, moving to the core of is there a framework of determining the gross income of non-salaried Kenyans? And the next thing you see is put the question. Something as important as that. You want to charge 1.5% of anybody who is not working on their gross income. How do you determine the gross income of non-salaried Kenyan? Is there a framework of doing that within that bill? Parliament could not even take 10 minutes to discuss something as important as that. And it's because of the structure of our political system. It's the structure of our political system. It's not a constitutional problem.
But we've had previous parliaments, and we've seen how probably the 12th parliament, the 11th parliament acted. This is the first time we're seeing this happening, that the government, it is simply rubber stamped. Hence, even the kind of legal hurdles they're experiencing, because surely one would expect that in parliamentary scrutiny, some of these things would be pointed out and picked out and remedied. But then you see the executive complaining about the judiciary appearing to hold back its policies, yet some of these processes were not scrutinized in a better manner, especially at the legislative process. Francis, surely there's something wrong. Do you think this situation can be remedied? The conduct of the 13th Parliament?
I think it's a matter of you see, when Parliament acts, when the executive acts, there's an imagination that they're acting in good faith. Every public member should feel like this member of Parliament is acting on my behalf in that house. I listened to one of the speeches by the majority leader, Kimani Ichung'wah, Honorable, and he said in Parliament that we are targeting, actually I think in Naivasha, he said, Mr. President, we are targeting by the 15th of March, this bill should be an act of Parliament, because we are targeting when employers are processing the salaries of employees. So you can imagine that Parliament has no intention of debating if it will delay the March collection. Then, if this act is passed, let's say for instance, for debate purposes, it's passed on the 15th of March, can they apply the tax for any salary that you have earned before the 15th of March? Because your salary is processed from the 25th of the previous month.
You've already worked before the law was in place.
Yes. So if they decide to pass it on that day, can they apply fully on your salary, or will they apply it on the 5 days that is remaining for the processing? You see, these are some of the things that parliamentarians need to discuss. Secondly, my issue with the housing levy or anything is if you look at the Constitution, the function of the national government is to come up with a housing policy. Is the housing levy a housing policy? Fred, I may use an example of the staff members at TV47. I can say maybe a third or more than a third of the staff in this workplace have their own land. Wouldn't a housing policy talk about their own land that they own now? Some of them have mortgages. Would a housing policy talk about their own mortgages and how they are going to service those mortgages? So this housing policy only talks about government housing on government land. And remember that some of these properties had houses before, but they did not have a bill in Parliament. They have actually, you've seen around the country, they have demolished houses. How were those houses built on this particular land without a bill in Parliament? So it means it is possible to have houses on this public land without an act of Parliament. The only objective that this act of Parliament is trying to achieve is to have Kenyans being taxed And that's what they should tell Kenyans.
Now, when it comes to the issue of public participation, when we see Parliament acting this way, most of this public participation is conducted by the same parliamentarians.
Yes.
Yet when it comes to Parliament, they're not even changing a full stop or a comma. And everything passes as it was,
yes,
as presented to Parliament. Do you think that we're getting any quality in what we call public participation, which is prescribed to us by the Constitution?
I think we are missing. I think we are missing something. There's some dynamics we are missing in our public participation, and I will give you an example. Usually, in the art of public policy, when government is trying to come up with a very big change in government, you don't introduce a bill in Parliament first, especially a bill that has not gone through the tandems of the executive. So this bill, if you know it, has been published by the majority leader. It does not have approval of cabinet, does not have approval of the Attorney General. So it is the action of one parliamentarian who has forwarded this bill to Parliament. So in good public policy making, one of the things you have to do is to come up with a draft bill and give it out to the people. Share with the people and ask them, the government is thinking of coming up with this policy. Can you kindly give us opinions on how you think how we should frame this bill? What are other policy proposals that come above this bill? The reason for that is because public participation in Parliament is very limited. It's limited only to the contents of the bill. So for me, who has a mortgage, I cannot come and tell Parliament, kindly excuse me from this act.
If it's not in there,
if it's not there,
you touch it.
Yes. So that is a problem with rushing some of these things through for convenience purpose. It's a conveyor belt. And the problem that comes up is once you pass the bill, then Parliament starts asking themselves, most of us here have mortgage as parliamentarians. Why are we being deducted a levy, and yet some of us are servicing a mortgage?
Wow.
So it becomes a big problem.
It is interesting, the conduct of Parliament that we're looking at now. This week they passed the affordable housing bill. What comes before them now is an ADCO report, but the concerns raised on the front page of the Daily Nation is taxation measures that we expect through the budget policy statement. The budget making process is underway and will continue for the next few weeks. Of course, we do expect that the finance bill which will contain most of these proposals will also be before Parliament. But the debate, according to Azimio leaders, they say they will try and block these proposals. How exactly they're going to do that remains to be seen. I would also like to welcome Judy Oyo to our panel this morning. Judy Oyo is a founder of Ability Beyond, and she's also a political analyst. Karibu sana. You found us discussing this issue of the budget. Azimio, One Kenya coalition leaders yesterday raised their concerns about the proposals that they've already seen through the budget policy statement, and they say we should expect more taxes. Basically what they're telling us is that yes, they will go out and block, but from what we've seen in Parliament so far, they've not been able to block anything that has come from government because of the numbers and how Kenya Kwanza is using the numbers in Parliament. Do you expect anything different when it comes to the budget process, that they will actually adjust anything in Parliament?
Oh, as at now, with the state that we are at Kenya, we don't see the adjustment on taxation because all we can see is that our president is so much strategic, and he makes sure that he has the numbers in the Parliament. And Azimio, as our opposition leader, who was always trying to defend the wananchi, it becomes another mystery of a lot of things. Like as at now, you'll find that despite you're talking about the budget allocation, but there's also this big thing that is going on where His Excellency Honorable Raila will be going out of Kenyan politics. So you find that there's kind of distraction of attention that at the end of the day, the taxation the taxation bill the budget bill might pass in the Parliament
as proposed, without any changes.
Without any changes, because I'm not convinced with our Kenyan politics as at now, because even when the court say that the housing levy, the taxation on the housing levy should be stopped, but it's still there and nobody has stopped it. It's like the government is above the laws and what the president has said, and that is final. And the parliament is just there to say, like, we are going to take it to the parliament, but in real sense, it has been passed to the...
Yes, and it's that sense of hopelessness as a nation when we do not have confidence that parliament will adjust anything or add any value to this conversation. They will still ensure that what comes from the executive is what is passed as is. Francis raised an issue that it's because of the numbers in parliament, but this is not the first time we're seeing a majority in this system of government. The Jubilee administration enjoyed quite a huge numbers as well in parliament. There were proposals even by the then president Uhuru Kenyatta on matters housing. There was a proposal on a housing fund as well that did not see the light of day. How come back then parliamentarians could say no to some things, but this time round it's simply yes, yes, yes? Evans.
Fred, I told you that we have a very big problem with parliament. And indeed it is true what you have said, that this is not the first time we are seeing a majority in parliament. But I think this Kenya Kwanza regime has become a bit more rogue than all the other regimes in terms of the executive emasculation of parliament and how they control, things within parliament. Remember, when Honorable Aden Duale was the majority leader in parliament, there was also the idea of tyranny of numbers. But then the difference was that I think in most bills that were introduced in parliament as at that time, they were not, although they were contested or they were contentious, at least there was some, form of restraint in terms of how the executive did the introduction. And my brother just said that if you look at the housing levy has emanated from one legislator. In fact, the other day, even the affordable housing bill that is supposed to remedy what they call the implementation framework has just emanated from the majority leader. The other day, the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya came out openly and publicly and said, look, Kenyans, I was not consulted in this process, and that tells you just how much, we are not able to rescue some of these things when they reach, the court processes. And I have said before, and I'll keep saying again, that this regime and this parliament has not learned the painful lessons of the Constitution 2010. I would tell you, Fred, that even if you look at the affordable housing bill that was passed by parliament, it is more unconstitutional. It's more unconstitutional than the parent, act that it seeks to remedy, than the parent, issue that it seeks to remedy on the housing, on the housing levy that was introduced by the Finance Act. So yes, the manner in which these bills are being introduced, they don't go through an extensive consultation process, such that by the time we are thinking there are issues, it is already very late. I would also add that you see the budget policy statement and what it outlines. The budget policy statement is supposed to give us a broader framework of what we expect when we actually see the finance bill being introduced around April. You will find that the scope of what is there in the budget policy statement is exceeded by what will find its way into the bill, because the government is just doing these things as a matter of formality. Let us present the budget policy statement.
It is a foregone conclusion.
It is a foregone conclusion.
This is what we'll do, and this is what
this is what we'll do at this point. And this is the reason why this is important. I have said that every regime had the center of what it takes as the silver bullet project. For this Kenya Kwanza regime, their main project, the legacy which the president seeks to assert, is, resident in this housing levy, this housing project. But the manner in which the president is going about it, the president is saying is leaving no stones untouched. In Naivasha, you heard the president say, telling members of parliament that you are the government in parliament. Then you ask yourself, what is then the oversight and legislative role of parliament? Because parliament is supposed to actually oversight the executive, the government itself in totality. But when the president stands and says, you are the government in parliament.
And probably we're just being too hard on the Kenya Kwanza side of parliament. what can we say about the minority side of this parliament as well? We saw that even when it came to voting for the affordable housing bill, most of them stayed away. Now we're seeing their leadership coming out and saying we will block it. And the question is, how? Do you have confidence that even the minority side can raise any resistance or even any voice to actually counter or to do or push back any of these policies that are coming from government?
I think it depends with the strategy they want to use. Even saying nothing can be a strategy in parliament. And sometimes you say so much things and realize this is not going anywhere. Like if you look
whatever you say is inconsequential.
Yes. Like if you look at the third reading of this affordable housing levy bill, you will notice that one of the leaders of the opposition, Junet Mohammed, told the rest of his colleagues, you see, every proposal you seek to amend, it's being shot down. Then what is our role in this house? If there's nothing that, even a full stop, that the House cannot agree to change in this bill, it means that the other side has been told, pass this bill without any changes whatsoever. And one of the reasons why that might be is because people know that one of the ways of delaying a bill is by proposing as many changes as possible. So the majority is saying that if we allow them to change a full stop in paragraph 1, these people will continue changing all the full stops in the next paragraphs. And this bill will take maybe 2 weeks in parliament. So let's shoot down all their proposal. Let this bill go to the Senate. Let the Senate pass as it is so that we can have an act. And then once we have an act, the opposition can come with the amendments later, once we are collecting this money. So sometimes I don't think we should admonish opposition MPs for staying silent or staying away from the debate, because at this point, they know that the direction given by President is that this bill should be passed by 15th of March. So they know that their recommendations will not go anywhere. Yes.
All right, and it raises a question, and Judy, I think you raised it as well, on the quality of opposition, or both the minority side inside the houses of legislation and even the alternative voice outside Parliament. Now, with the news we are seeing, the possible exit of Raila Odinga from the politics of this country, and gets a job. Are you confident that we have a voice strong enough to counter this administration? Because now, in the absence of a reasonable parliament, who do we turn to?
The exit of BAMBA per se is one of the best things that is yet to happen, but it's also one of the blows that we're going to get as Kenyans, because at the end of the day, he's been the very one person who has been voicing up, and with each and every threat, he keeps standing on his words. But we have these people who are always back on his back every time, and supporting him just once Baba says so. You see, so with Baba exiting is something good, but also it's something that is raising a lot of question on who will now be defending, who will now be the strongest opposition in Kenya, who will now be stopping this taxation, because this is becoming even much tougher to the persons with disability, because you say that the taxation is being raised. That means that our product that we are getting out of the country also increases with the rating of the fundings. A lot of people were funding the amputee walking aids, that is the prosthetic, the crutches, the wheelchairs. The price is increasing, and many of investors are going out. So it's becoming something tough. Nobody is talking about the people with disability, the impact that it brings. And even when we say that the housing levy that is there is the housing that is being constructed, is it even disability friendly? So with Baba going, it's going to be twice tougher, because we still don't know who is going to succeed him, or who is going to be that man that will always stand on his words, and that's it. Because we have many of...
will actually weaken further this parliamentary minority. Do you think, the way we are seeing them now, do you think the exit of Raila Odinga will actually weaken further the minority in parliament?
It might weaken, or it might give a space to another young person coming up, because we've seen Babu Owino trying so hard to voice up. But let's put it at, it might give an opportunity to young leadership also rising up, but it also might weaken to the older generation that has been supporting us through these years, because it's quite a lot to learn and to be on that stand.
Evans, we appear to be suffering from an over-reliance on Raila Odinga to be the voice of the people, especially on matters like what we are seeing now, punitive taxation, government policies that are obviously largely unchecked by the hazards of legislation. With his exit, what do you foresee for this nation?
Fred, I think I should begin by saying the challenge also with our politics is that our politics has always been structured around personalities. If you look at even in terms of our political party arrangement and succession, it's always around personalities. I mean, there is no coalition political party that barely survive 2 or more election cycles, because if the personality running the engine of that political party, of that political alliance, or that political movement is not at the forefront, then we end up with a scenario where all the other people back off. Now, with the exit of BAMBA, I think somehow there is a more political reason why this regime is supporting the AU candidature of BAMBA, because they know that they will simply have pushovers after BAMBA has left the scene, if at all is going to clinch the AU position. And with that, I am not quite optimistic as she is that somebody will sprout up. I think the exit of BAMBA is going to lead to a scenario where the dereliction of duty in parliament is going to be a bit notch higher, because I agree that sometimes the opposition MPs are not to blame in terms of why they leave the House of Parliament, why they are not available in important debates. Because I told you as I began that there is something called put the question, that even before interrogative debate, meaningful debate, engagement, and my learned friend did adduce to the question of filibustering, where you raise so many questions, you raise so many amendments, in a manner to derail the process. You see, that was a strategy some time back, but it's not meaningful right now, because either way, you are damned if you do, you are damned if you don't. They have the majority. So with the exit of BAMBA, we're going to see a scenario where the government will be feeling some fresh air, because BAMBA has always been the thorn in the flesh. And his politics has always been opposition, BAMBA has this combative politics that, although many may not have, noted the importance of that kind of politics, I think they will get the feel of it when BAMBA exits, because I can tell you, Fred, nobody has the mettle and the mandate strong enough to coordinate, for instance, a movement or even a protest, nationwide protest, for even 1 week alone. But BAMBA would do that. Sometimes he would even remain alone. So then so many people, even those who had no ideas of interrogating government policies, would always coil around him to just listen to what he's saying. Is that voice that would give us a reason to raise eyebrows and, and be like, wow, something is happening. Remember 2016, 2017, the NYS saga, when the first person to raise it was BAMBA. When it was raised, there were issues that, BAMBA was playing politics. It later came out to be true. You recall the G2G oil deal, it was raised by BAMBA, they dismissed the statement, but later on it came out to be true. So I think that is going to affect us in broader ways we may not understand as we speak.
Francis, your take on this?
I think there's a deep problem with Kenya's foreign policy. And one of the reasons I say that is because Kenya has an opportunity to field a candidate for the AU Commission chairperson, and out of 55 million Kenyans, they decided that BAMBA is the best candidate. I think that's a very poor decision from government and as well as BAMBA's advisors. And part of the reason, I think, is that they do not understand what the role of the AU Commission chairperson is. And I can give you an example of the EAC Secretary General, Peter Mathuki. I think one of the people who have done well for Kenya in the international scene is Peter Mathuki. And this is because, one, he comes from a technical background, and secondly, secondly, he's still young, he's still of age. I think Baba is too old for the position that he wants, and it's not out of gist or anything. It's just that sometimes there's a good position and the right position at the right time. I think this position is coming very late in his day in politics. And also the fact that the AU Commission chairperson, as much as it's called a chairperson, the role of this chairperson is really is a secretary general of a international body. And I don't think at this age, this is what Baba requires. I think it's too much work. It's too much work. It requires fragility. Also, look at the ages of the heads of states. Remember, Secretary General, you are almost a secretary in its meaning. So you are much older than even the heads of states of Africa.
So going for the chairperson of the AU Commission, not necessarily the CEO. Anyway, but how do you think it was going to affect our politics? We are already complaining about the dereliction of duty by Parliament. The minority side of the House does not appear to have a unifying factor for them to put up a formidable pushback to any government policy. Now with the Baba out of the picture, do you think they could in some way find that metal to do that?
I was going there, but one of the reasons the opposition has been quite weak in Kenya is because they do not usually have a strategy towards parliamentary seats, both at the national level and the county. So you find that every person who is around Baba wants either a prime minister position, a cabinet position, but you have 7 or 8 people around him that none of them is saying, let me go and run for governor. I might bring a couple of votes for Baba. So that is one of the problems that we will see going forward, because Baba will leave a vacuum where he has had some sort of pentagon, around 7 people around him. So the question will be, where will these 7 people go? Because all their ambitions in all their lives has been to be around Baba. So what position will they run in the next election? So also, if you look at the leadership of what you call Azimio in Parliament, I think they chose one of the weakest leaders, Honorable Opiyo Wandayi. We are used as Kenyans.
You think that was a mistake?
I think that was a big mistake, because as Kenyans, when you ask a Kenyan, even a class 1 student, who is the leader of opposition, they need to have that name in mind. I don't think today if you go around and ask even your son or your daughter who is the leader of opposition in Parliament, they will know, because we are used to people, very vocal individuals, very astute personalities who are standing in the leadership of the opposition. People like Junet Mohammed, we're used to people like Honorable Mbadi, so that if these people speak, we know Baba is speaking. I don't think today if Opiyo Wandayi orders people around, I don't think people will answer.
Interesting, but you see now, and you'll still stay with Parliament, because now, after they're done with the affordable housing bill, the next priority they'll have is a NADCO report. And in that lies so many proposals, some very interesting, including the establishment of the Office of Official Leader of Opposition. And now the debate in the dailies is who will occupy that position. And I've seen that already within Azimio there are differences. This story is on page 6. Differences of opposition leaders' office splits Azimio. Kalonzo allies say he's best suited for the seat, as he will be the Azimio flag bearer in 2027, but others are saying if at all it is formed, that position should go to the leader or to a party that has a majority in Parliament or more members in Parliament, which is obviously ODM. But are we jumping the gun? Is this the kind of debate that Azimio should be engaging in right now, given the fact that the NADCO really has a lot more in store for Kenya, including the reconstitution of the IEBC, Judy?
Oh, we know that our politics has always been on what am I going to gain or what am I going to not gain. And coming on this, I think the Azimio is kind of trying to say that despite we are working on how we can support Baba on going to AU, but we still have our eyes on Kenya. Yeah, Kalonzo is best benefit. He's a good fit on that position. He's been in politics for several times. He's done his good and his bad on his own way, but it doesn't mean that because ODM has the major, as a bigger number in politics, the one that seat should go to ODM. So who will occupy that seat if Baba is not around. Because at the end of the year, their party leader was Baba. It is no longer there. So the next party leader is Kalonzo Musyoka. Because it's not all about ODM, it's also about Azimio. Yeah, because that will be kind of, ODM will be really wanting everything to be on their side, of which that is not it. We have a coalition. And the next person in power will be Kalonzo Musyoka, followed by Musalia Mudavadi, and we have also Martha Karua in the picture. Even though Martha Karua kind of a way has been working on her sides because she's a very intelligent woman. We have also on that kind of a line. And if we say that we are going to look at this position with the age or how they've been served with the age of the current young people, and now these guys are older people. But you also have this thing called experience and how many years have they been here. But you also need, we have this position that can be occupied with somebody younger, but we still have Kalonzo Musyoka as our running.
Okay. But you get the feeling that the conversation appears to change significantly with the fact that Baba now, or Raila Odinga, is gunning for a different job. The fact that NADCO is so important to Kenyans in as far as the issues it seeks to address. But we appear to have changed the conversation because of the exit of Raila Odinga, or the possible exit of Raila Odinga changes a lot in how we approach this conversation.
Okay, Fred, I think this is about political interest. And I began by saying there could be a more reason that is not open to the general public why the government is supporting Baba's AU role, which may or may not occur. Actually, Baba himself has admitted that his candidature for the AU role is a political sabbatical. It's not retirement per se, as people are already assuming that Baba is, out of the national political race and activities. Now, it is true that if Baba clinches the AU role, his involvement in our national politics will greatly reduce. But I think the Azimio coalition is not having the right conversation, as we speak, because there is a lot that underlies the NADCO report that touches on Kenyans, just more than the two positions. Although the report appears to be concentrated around the two positions because they have a lot of political interest. Then the problem that comes with that is, you will recall that there is nothing new that NADCO tells us, that BBI did not tell us. But then this time, the proponents of both the proponents, the opponents of BBI are the chief proponents of the NADCO report, which means they are looking at a greater interest that would underlie with it. Some of the proposals that have been, included in the NADCO report will require for us to go for a referendum. Do we have the timelines? Do we have the budget? Already the High Court has told us the other day, let the IEBC selection panel continue with its work and begin the process within 90 days. The other day when I saw debate on the NADCO report in Parliament, the initial debate on Parliament, when they were adopting the report, they said, well, there is nothing, the findings of the court are not inconsistent with what we are presenting, because the NADCO report, told us, begin implementation within 90 days upon adoption of the report by Parliament. The court is also telling these people, select the IBC commissioners within 90 days. So they are thinking of merging the process, finding an innovative way of complying with what the court is saying. But then all these things have a political and constitutional implication, and that must come at the backdrop of the politicians. We know very well that we are a very litigious country. We like going to court. And I can assure you, this is not going to be the end of it. We may spend the next 4 years on the NADCO report. We may not have the constitutional amendments that we wish to, unless something fundamentally happens, especially noting that this process, again, the president was involved in terms of initiation. Unless they want to use a parliamentary route, it is going to be problematic.
Francis, my concern is the fact that Raila Odinga, with this push by government for the AU job, appears to have gone quiet on a lot of things, for obvious reasons. If the government is the one campaigning for you, you may not want really to keep on pushing back on the same. But do you feel that that could affect some of the issues that are being discussed within the NADCO report, the lack of a voice from Raila Odinga?
I think we need to accept as Kenyans that Raila Odinga is part and parcel of this NADCO report. So we should not hope and feel like we need Raila Odinga to oppose on any particular subject, because I think he had an appointee.
He's in full agreement with everything as it is.
He's in full agreement with NADCO. In fact, Raila Odinga opposes the constitution, which is a very fun fact in being in the opposition. So if you look at, for instance, he has mentioned, my colleague has just mentioned about appointment of IBC commissioners. The constitution is clear on how IBC commissioners are being appointed. The president followed the constitution in gazetting the selection committee. Raila Odinga opposed that selection committee. Right as we speak, after I think we are almost going to 12 months, we still do not know how many people applied for those positions. We still don't know who the names of those people are. We still don't have a short list of the possible candidates for those positions. So it means even the people who are selected are going contrary to the provisions of the Constitution. I know the court said that the Constitution did not provide a timeline, but in law we say that if a timeline is not provided, we assume that you should do it as soon as possible, or 14 days. We assume you should take 14 days to do that action. So where Kenyans should be at the moment is to feel like Raila is in government. Raila has always been in government. We do not...
exit at this point will not matter? Are you saying that?
Yes, Raila has always, since the demonstration, there was a silent code between Raila and the government, and Raila joined the executive. So the question is, what position is he holding at what terms? So that's the question we should be asking.
Do you think the Azimio team now is having the correct conversation on who should occupy the obsession about the office of the official leader of opposition?
I think we had this debate before here some months back, and I told Kenyans that we do not have a leader of official opposition. I don't see what it will bring to the table, even if the NADCO report is adopted, because opposition in Kenya it's not presidential. Opposition in Kenya is parliamentary. So are we saying that because one of the suggestions is to have the office of the leader of opposition in parliament, are we saying in some sort of way that the losing candidate of a presidential election will become a parliamentarian? So we are really not clear on what we want to achieve with this office. As I proposed earlier, the easiest thing to do right now will be go to the Political Parties Act, amend the Political Parties Act that the losing presidential candidate, at least, or all the losing presidential candidate be brought together to vote for a leader of the official opposition, if they feel like they really need that position. But as we speak right now, I think the NADCO report is a really weak report in terms of substance. I think it's only strong in terms of the political mileage, but it's really weak in substance. It is, as my colleague stated, it's the BBI, but it has been colored with a different color. It has been panel beaten, so it looks like a different baby, but it's still the same baby.
Interesting. Anything to add on that, Judy? This issue of the NADCO report, and do you feel that this is still a conversation we should be having right now? Because the nation appears to have moved on from this. I think it's only the reconstitution of the IEBC that probably we are more concerned about.
I think this is taking Kenyans away from what we're supposed to concentrate on, especially on the IBC selection. So in our politics, you always have to look for what do we do so that we can distract the wananchi out of something that is more meaningful, because IBC is very, very critical and we should concentrate on that. But now we are being given some topics to talk on. And because last time we were doing the BBI, it wasn't supported with the current government, but now it's now being supported in another name. So that means that our Kenyan politics, it's about self-interest and how well it benefits you. So you oppose it, you refuse on it and you oppose it today, and then tomorrow you structure it and sugarcoat it and make it something different, but it's just the same thing. But it's only, at the end of the day, it's a self-benefit for our leaders. And it doesn't benefit the normal wananchi. Because the same thing, your problem will always be talked about, and it will be put in a way that you are being helped. Now, when the president was talking about how watu wanakataa kulipa, wanasema wanaenda kwa court ndio tusiendeleze tax levy, tusiendeleze housing levy, nyi mtapata kazi wapi? And at the end of the day, these guys who are working now, hawa wenye wanapata kazi, hawa wenye wanakatwa, how will they sustain their family? How will they take their students to school? And even at that point when he's looking for the job opportunity for other people, what are the people with disability gaining on that? And how is the housing structured? Is it even comfortable for all the wananchi, for the PWDs, for the old people, and for the guys who are being oppressed on paying on something that they don't really going to benefit on it like immediately or maybe in future? So I think a lot of things need to be restructured.
The other concern that many people are not really talking about is the fact that we are set to defy the Constitution in a few weeks' time. By March, end of this month, that delimitation and review of boundaries will not happen. This means that 8 to 12-year window lapses for the very first time under this Constitution. It will be the first time that we're defying this provision of the law. And no one is concerned that we're actually doing this. Don't you think that from a legal perspective, we are going down a steep slope, that if we start defying the Constitution on some of these states, it could open up a possibility that we could continue in the same pattern and defy more provisions or prescriptions of the law without consequence?
I think, Fred, I have said before that as a country, our problem is that we often are not proactive about anything. We only act in circumstances of crisis. That is when the political class wakes up. Today we are talking about IBC reforms. Today we are talking about the NADCO report. We will soon forget about it and start thinking of reforms on elections and electoral law. We rarely reach a point as a country where there is no crisis, but we think of sorting out our problems. We always wait for a crisis to appear. Today, now we are in a crisis where at the end of this, March, we are going to have a scenario where we are not able to review the boundaries, a constitutional mandate of the Independent and Electoral and Boundaries Commission. I think one of the most important proposals that have been made by Senior Counsel Tindamolo as part of the JLAC committee, because I've seen JLAC committee is seized of that matter. They are thinking of that the first constitutional amendment they should be able to have is that of extending the time. Let's say, the review should be between 8 to 17 years, so that even as they reconstitute IEBC will then have a mandate to review the boundaries. Because we are at a scenario where even if we were to implement that provision, we would not, because we don't have IEBC commissioners in office. And the lack of IEBC commissioners in office is also a political problem. It's not a legal problem. The Constitution is very, very clear. The Elections Act is very clear. The IEBC Act is very clear on reconstitution. But then, because we were in a political crisis, we were able to drag that. The selection panel did not do its work at the right time. Remember also, at this time we speak, we have so many by-elections that are pending. We have court declarations annulling several elections. None of them has been done because we do not have a commission in office. The courts told us the IBC Secretariat has no mandate, constitutional mandate, to perform some of these functions. We must have a threshold of at least 3 commissioners in office. So Parliament is now, the JLAC is now proposing that the first constitutional amendment that we need to have is to increase the time for review, of the boundaries. Do I think it's a good proposal? I don't think so. Indeed, when we begin that culture of defying the timelines of the Constitution because of political expediency, and then find an innovative way to drag the Constitution and to tamper with already, what Kenyans put into place, you can imagine we're going to get into so many problems. There was a very good reason, if you look at all the Bomas report, the WACO draft and all this, the Guy report, why the review was placed between 8 to 12 years, because we know how emotive, election issues are. Today we want to drag it to 17, or let's say 20. Is that a good idea?
Francis, I want your opinion on this matter, because if at all we will be able, because this Constitution so far has not been amended.
Yes.
Any attempt to amend the Constitution has been unsuccessful up until now. That could be the very first successful amendment if it it happens. But then again, we are not seeing any sense of urgency. If at all we were seeing we are going very fast down this route, there's a crisis in about a month's time. We've just come from a very long Christmas break by the legislators. There was no sense of urgency to call for a special sitting of Parliament to address this matter. They came back in February. The first thing they're attending to is the affordable housing bill, not even the NADCO report and the reconstitution of the IEBC. Do you think that this could actually be a manufactured crisis and not something that happened by accident?
So I'd like to correct two instances that you've mentioned. That one, that there was no emergency session that was called. Actually, for the introduction of the housing bill, that was an emergency session because Parliament closed in November and the bill was introduced in December. So even the public participation that occurred throughout December and January, that was an emergency session because Parliament reopened in February 15th. So
my concern is that emergency session did not address the NADCO issue.
Their focus was somewhere else, and the focus was directed by President. Focus on this. For myself, the issue of boundary limitation, I don't see it as a crisis per se, and this is the reason why. I participated in the last election of Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe before I was part of the group that went before the observers, and part of the things that the timelines that Zimbabwe had to do before the election was boundary review. And boundary review is not a job that will be done within 1 or 2 years. That is something that before even starting the boundary review, there has to be the kind of work, the preliminary work that is done by technical experts. You have the kind of preliminary public participation to get the views of the people. So at a minimum, that process should take at least 3 years. So even if we bring those commissioners today, the first thing they'll need to know is how do we start learning on this? What are we even doing here? They need to start learning on the job. And that's why I don't see it as a crisis that needs to be resolved now. Because
But yet we are defying the Constitution. The dates are set by the Constitution. It is us who made that a crisis.
Yes, and we are beyond violating the Constitution because we have been violating this Constitution since the first day. If you can remember well, I remember after we passed this new Constitution, the late President Kibaki tried to appoint a Chief Justice, not knowing that that role has been transferred to the Judicial Service Commission. So I can tell you that we have a leeway, and I think the proposal by Parliament that we can extend this timeline is not bad. It's not a bad proposal, because
if we are successful in extending this date, don't you think that it will open up discussions to changing the date of the election, for example, changing the date when the president is being sworn in? Don't you think it is possible?
That's why in the Constitution, and I wanted to correct the fact that you said this Constitution has never been amended, but actually it has been amended a couple of times. There are two things. The Constitution,
successful amendment?
Yes, okay. The Constitution has protected clauses and it has unprotected clauses. Today, if you want to amend let me not say it because I don't remember all the protected clauses, but if you want to, one of the protected clauses is the roles of the president, the function of the president. If you want to amend the function of the president, you'll require a referendum. But if there's something else under, let's say, Article 10, you want to increase one of the values of this Constitution, do I think that you need a referendum to do that? I don't think so. This is one of the issues that we need to ask ourselves. Is the IEBC's function in terms of the timeline, is it a protected clause in the Constitution? That's what we need to ask ourselves. If it is, then I will be a bit, I'll be a bit scared of amending it, because once you open that leeway of amending protected clauses, that's where you invite things like NADCO and BBI. But if it is not, I'm happy to say that the Parliament can do that. We have had instances where some of the things in Parliament have been extended. One of them is National Lands Commission, which had a timeline, I think 5 years, to do certain things, to review public leases. And that function ended, but the Uhuru government remained silent. So NLC was in the position whereby it has so many leases to review, but no function. So everything died by the instance because no one had the kind of political mileage to extend this function, because the people who are being affected by this review of leases were politicians. So they did not want these leases to be extended.
All right.
Yeah.
And in just a moment, we'll be heading to I think it's Elgeyo Marakwet County. I will be getting an update there with the expected arrival of President William Ruto for the burial of Kelvin Kiptum, who features on all the front pages of our dailies today. He's being buried today, and we'll be getting an update from there. But before that, Judy, anything to add as a final comment?
What I will need to add is that it's high time that we change our politics not to be self-oriented or loyalty-oriented, because it's gonna take us to a drainage. And also, as we amend all the taxes that are being done, to also make sure that we consider the normal wananchi and the high taxation that is happening on adjusting the budget, because it's really affecting the people with disability and getting the access, and also it's really putting into risk the normal Kenyan wananchi, because there's no even adjustment of salary at the end of the day. Okay. So people are fighting to survive, but the government is fighting to adjust on a budget that we don't know whether it's gonna see the light of a day tomorrow, or it's something that is benefiting them for their own personal gain.
A final comment.
Thank you so much, Fred. I think in making my final comment, I first have to say that I send my condolences to the family of Kelvin Kiptum, who was a national hero and an icon. I think how the government has handled everything around athletes this country has all gone wrong. But as for now, we can concentrate on the mourning period, and we can sort out all our issues later on. I can also say that indeed, let us not have the fear of amending the Constitution. In fact, I would add to my colleague that the issue of boundary review is one of the protected clauses, including the Article 10 that he indeed alluded to. The fear to amend the Constitution will not give us the latitude to have open political conversation, but we need to. The thing is, we don't need to amend the Constitution for political reasons. Lastly, Fred, I would like to say that the Constitution has put forth a culture of political accountability. It seeks to realign the way we have structured our politics. And that spirit, the center core of the Constitution 2010, was to right our wrongs. Okay. That mission is still on. Okay. And I can promise you that this government too will learn the painful lessons of this Constitution.
30 seconds, Francis. Anything else to add?
Yes, thank you for inviting us to this session. I think one of the things that we need to be assured of is that in the next few weeks we will be in court again to debate on whether the housing levy is a constitutional act of parliament and whether it's not. And I think let the best side win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francis Wanjiku, head of the public policy at IC Law LLP. Judy Oyo, founder Ability Beyond and political analyst, and Ndong Evans, constitutional law analyst. Our panelists